Hey everybody, welcome back to another Bald movie. Today we're going to be talking about Fruitvale Station, a film that was written and directed by one Ryan Coogler. This was his first feature film. He'd done a lot of independent and short features before this. This is his first feature film, and he and Michael B. Jordan went on to collaborate on many successful projects from here, including the multiple Rocky spinoffs, Creed, Black Panther. I just found, his current projects are?
No.
They're pretty diametrically opposed in tone and subject, but one is a LeBron James backed sequel to Space Jam.
Okay. Yep.
Which, that's not even, I'm not even mad. That could be pretty awesome. And then an yet untitled Fred Hampton project. Do you recognize that name, Fred Hampton?
No, should I?
Fred Hampton was a 21-year-old Black Panther, leader of the Black Panther faction in Chicago, that was murdered in 1971 in his bed in a pre-dawn raid by FBI agents because he was a destabilizing influence on the United States. So interesting that Ryan Coogler, who made a lot of money, I'm sure, on Black Panther, is coming back to do the OG. This stars Michael B. Jordan, as I mentioned, who is fantastic. Melanie Diaz, which I haven't seen in a lot. I've seen her in some incidental things when I was looking at her filmography. She had a pretty memorable appearance in the HBO series Girls. What was that, the Bellico Project?
Bilko Experiment, yeah.
Bilko Experiment. She was in that, apparently, which I did not see. And also the ever-reliable Octavia Spencer, who plays... Michael B. Jordan's mother in this movie, Oscar's mother.
Yeah.
This movie is about the real life murder at the Fruitvale Station on the BART transport system, the Bay Area, I guess, rail transport system. As he and his friends were going back to their homes from a New Year's Eve celebration in San Francisco. And a lot of details are going to be familiar for anyone who's been watching the news in the last few weeks, months, years. We thought it was like, this is something that I've been wanting to see for a couple of years now, and it seemed like it was a good time to do it. Jim, what did you think about Fruitvale Station?
I thought it was great. The acting is excellent, which you would expect from a couple of those stars, at least, that you mentioned. Michael Jordan. It's a weird name. He's the Michael Jordan of acting, literally. Octavia Spencer, like you said, always great. I love her and everything she's in. So that part was impeccable. The direction I didn't find particularly flashy or interesting. It's serviceable. It's utilitarian. It's what it needs to be in a movie like this. Doing no more, no less. And I mean, I was compelled by the story, obviously. The thing that I really appreciate about this movie is that they don't try to, in some ways they do, but in other ways they very much don't try to make Oscar Grant a hero. He's just, he comes across as a guy who has made a couple mistakes, is trying to better himself, trying to do the right thing, and just gets caught up with his past. It comes back to haunt him in ways that he couldn't have foreseen, in ways that he can't do anything about. It doesn't try to whitewash any of that and say, oh, like he was this excellent example of everything you need to be in society. He's cheated on his girlfriend / potentially wife. He was in prison at some point in the past, which is what comes back to haunt him. But
some kind of drug gang related thing.
How much are you gonna hold him accountable for that, right? And the movie kind of, I don't even want to say walks a line there. It's just like, this is a depiction of a person, not a character.
Right. And he was, I think, 20 years old when he's dead, when he died. 22 years old. But that's the point. And I thought that this is an interesting, I guess going into this, because I read the reviews and it's like, it's this loving father and beloved son who gets killed. And I'm like, okay, so this might, because every once in a while you get, what the media, quote unquote, a perfect victim.
Sure.
That, he's unimpeachable from like a moral, ethical, societal standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But more often than not, you have people who are flawed victims that have had run-ins with the law, who've had, struggles with, their employment. They're no angel is what you hear that mentioned when they're talking about in terms of like whether they deserve to be killed by police action or not. And I thought I was really surprised to see this. Like the first half of this movie kind of shows this guy's struggle and suggests that, he was trying to turn a corner. Like I'm sure, like I know people like this. I have a cousin who, got mixed up in drugs and gangs, and, struggled and, tried to fly right. Now he's 32 years old. He's got a house and he's married and he's got kids. And like, that's all this a crazy past. Right. We'll never know whether, Oscar Grant was about to turn that corner. The movie suggests it. And usually when something like that happens, it's multiple corners turn and then you get turned back around and your old life tries to pull you back. But it is also shows the tragedy, and how this is, like a lot of times, when a black man gets killed, it's like, oh, he's a thug or he's a criminal or he had all this background problems. Look at his arrest sheet. They don't talk about like, the children are going to grow up without fathers, the impacts in a family, 30, 40, 50, 100 people directly involved in this and their attitudes about law enforcement change. Yeah. And it's a rotten society. And I thought it's a short film. It's only about 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. And it does a really good job of just painting a day in this guy. Like this was the last 24 hours he was alive. And what was he thinking? What was he doing? Did he deserve to die?
I really like what you said about the effects of the the death of Oscar Grant, because the movie very much wants to emphasize that, and it does it by not showing it. It's like it implies everything that you need to know about this. Like the final scene of this movie is so powerful. Like where it chooses to end the film says so much about the future of the relationship between law enforcement and these people, because of the actions of this, this one or two bad cops who just, murdered this guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's like, did you do any reading about like the actual underlying criminal case here against the officers and whatnot?
Yeah, I did a bunch of reading about it.
Because that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. Do you want to talk about the movie a little bit more?
Yeah.
Because like sometimes like I feel like we get into what the movie's about and we don't discuss the movie itself. Because I want to talk about
that's the thing. I wanted to point that out because the direction. I feel like that's the one piece of directing that made a lot of sense. Like, and maybe that's down to editing. I don't know, or maybe they shot 40 minutes after that and just decided no, this is the best place to end it. But I thought that was like the one flare of editing that really stood out to me.
Yeah, and like you mentioned the cinematography being kind of like basic and subdued. I felt like it was almost very documentary. Like I felt like a fly in the wall in his family home as they're celebrating New Year's Eve when they're on the train and everyone's kind of bummed they're going to miss the thing, but then everybody kind of like comes together as a community to provide music and dancing and a festival. I thought that was an probably an artistic choice to like let the material kind of stand on its own. But as a result of this, the things you can really talk about, because, there's very little in the sense of like traditional sets. Like this does feel like it was filmed in people's homes. Like it has that claustrophobic effect that like this isn't a set. The cameraman is actually smushed into a wall and everyone like, 6 people will barely fit in this kitchen, etc. But what's left to talk about is performances. And unfortunately, I don't know what the secret sauce is that someone like Michael B. Jordan has that can make him this fucking charismatic. And for that matter, Melanie Diaz, like they really sell me of this like kind of troubled couple that have had some trust issues. The fact that Oscar has kind of like betrayed her trust on multiple different levels before, and she's not sure how she feels about that. But goddamn, he loves their daughter. And, he loves his mom loves him, but, even she has to give him some tough love and a flashback that what I thought was a nice artistic grace note, him going to the beach and kind of like trying to turn that final corner.
And that scene is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I don't know how guys like Tom Hanks, Denzel Washington, Michael B. Jordan, they have this thing where they can just give natural performances. I can see when someone doesn't have it. Like we've been watching a lot of Star Trek on our Twitch watch parties, and you know those old Star Trek. Like you get into planetary governor of the week and his retinue, and there's a lot of people that don't know how to act naturally. A lot of red shirts on the Enterprise have no idea how to act like a fucking human being.
Yeah.
But these people, I mean, the everyone in this, like, you know, Octavia Spencer, just again rock fucking solid as his mom. You know, this you know, rocking his life. And it wasn't like just all unconditional love, you know, like she gives him, like I said, there's a lot of tough love there. But I don't know what it is about the performances, because at some points in the movie he does, like, I was like, fuck, when he was threatening his boss, like clearly, like, if you don't give me his job back, I'm gonna wait for you out in the parking lot and beat the shit out of you. But I don't know, it's like, but his boss doesn't really take it seriously. But, you know, he's also capable, like, you know, like he is capable of like violence under right conditions. Yet,
presumably, I mean,
you still,
I don't know what he landed in prison for. Probably drugs.
Right. Or some kind of, maybe even like snitching, like he was loosely related to drugs, and that was a plea for a lesser sentence. I don't know. He pissed off one of these blood sub factions for sure, the DGF or whatever. But yeah, I don't know what the secret sauce and this guy seems like he's always had it, because, you know, this guy first came into my radar as Wallace on the in The Wire.
Yeah,
you know, the original gut punch scene of The Wire, late in season 1. If you haven't seen it, fucking watch it now, because we're coming up on the 20th anniversary. I'm about to just start spoiling The Wire in every podcast, because every time I talk a little spoiler, people get so fucking pissed. I'm like, come on now.
It's 20 years. You had the time. You had the chance.
Bill Simmons spilt the beans on Stringer Bell 10 years ago, and I said, damn it, I better start watching The Wire. I'm not going to find out. That was 10 years ago. But this guy has had, you know, this really impressive career as a young man, and now as a full-grown man, and I don't think he's going it, you know. I don't think he's going anywhere either. So
oh yeah, he's too good. He's too good to go anywhere.
But what to say about the performances, you know, that he's able to connect with a guy who, you know, he's portraying this man growing up in Oakland, and he's able to connect with a 43-year-old dude that grew up in the cornfields of Indiana. That's impressive. The other thing I thought was interesting from a narrative perspective is this, like, last 24 hours of a man's life. I was really skeptical that they were going to, like, sketch this guy's life appropriately in that period of time, but I thought they did. I mean, you know, this certainly doesn't capture the full the depth and width of the life of Oscar Grant, but I did feel like I got a pretty good working knowledge on it, and I could see how, you know, like, you know, there was obviously a bunch of protesting, there were some riots about this incident. But this film, I felt, contained all the arguments that you could hear on cable news of the day. You know, he's no angel. Oh, that might be true, but he didn't deserve to die. He was a father to this child. Oh, but, you know, he should have thought of that before he went into prison, before he punched that guy, etc. You know, if he had just, like, I was reading court transcripts, and I guess the officer in charge of the scene, the lady cop, said, you know, her official sworn testimony is if this guy and his friends had obeyed our verbal orders, then they would have been alive today. And I don't know. How much more about the movie do you want to talk about before we get into the social commentary part?
I don't know. It's interesting. Like the scope of this movie is roughly 24 hours. You know, it jumps back and forth from New Year's Day 2019 when he dies to New Year's Day, or sorry, not 2019, 2009. Is that right?
I think so.
To 2008 and 2007. So, you know, we get glimpses 2 years back, but really it centers around this 24 hours. And I keep waiting in this film when I'm watching it for his luck to turn. Like, you know, he's on his way back to some life that he can be proud of. I keep seeing, like, okay, well, he's down on his luck at the moment, you know, but he's making good decisions. And I keep waiting. I'm like, okay, when are things going to go bad for him? When I shouldn't be waiting for that. I know when things go bad for him. It's that New Year's Eve morning when he's murdered by the cops. That's when things go bad. That's what this movie's about. And I don't know if I'm so conditioned to just think that like things are going, no matter how hard you try, no matter how good you are, no matter what your luck is, sometime it's going to turn if you're especially a young black man in this country. That I just kept waiting for it, even though the movie right up front says this is when things go bad.
Yeah, I caught this. I find myself doing that too, and I think that's, you know, some of the Coogler magic is that it was still somewhat shocking when he actually got shot, because like you said, I was like, well, what is the thing that's going to, like, I was kind of rooting for Oscar to make it through this day.
Right.
You know, and then like, you know, there's like this other stuff, like things I didn't even think of, like his mom's reaction to like, hey, I want to protect my son. I want to make sure don't drive downtown. I don't want you to get, you know, because you're going to drink and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, take the train, and how she feels guilt about that. Like, oh my God, I was just trying to keep him safe and I ended up getting him killed. And
I feel like she felt that she didn't trust him enough. And that was the real core of the problem.
And as a parent, like I hugged my son after dinner, and I'm like, I don't know what I would ever do if my son at 22 years old, if he had, you know, I'm trying to do my best raising this kid, but like, I don't know, I can see him getting a girl pregnant. I can see him having employment struggles. I can see him getting involved in like drugs, alcohol, gambling stuff, you know, that are, you know, human things. And I'd always be rooting for him to turn things around. And that's where I got like really emotional. The idea that like he would be either murdered or through some negligent accident, because the officer that actually shot the guy swore that he thought he was drawing his taser. And he shot the guy in the back. But like the idea that you have a man on the ground, you got 3 guys on him, and 1 guy's on his neck, and you're expecting him to obey verbal commands at this point. And if he doesn't, then you can use extreme pain or electric voltage or a handgun to enforce compliance. I don't know. And I don't know how to fix it, because it just seems like for generations, or at least a couple generations, the cops have been told that like the streets out there are dangerous. It's the most dangerous job you can possibly have. Every time you go up to a traffic stop, it's a gamble of your life. It's you against them. When the reality is, being a police officer isn't in, I think, the top 20 most dangerous jobs in the United States. You know, and we don't allow any other latitude. Like, you know, if there's a high voltage power technician has a bad day at work, he doesn't get to go and murder a customer, or, you know, murder his boss because, you know, I was in a lot of stress and I was fearing for my life. And the idea that like, I don't know. Like, I think that like at some point the cops in the country have to kind of come to grips with the fact that part of holding arms and being entrusted with deadly force is occasionally you're going to die for some bad people. And you can't kill 10 times as many people as the people kill you in a year, and have the society continue to hold you up as like a hero. And it's not all the officers. And I thought that was another thing that was really interesting, how I feel like the cop, as he's displayed in this movie, that did the most to amp up the situation was one of the one that was like painted out to be a bro. Like once the guy got killed, he's like, the fuck did you do? And he's like holding the guy's hand and trying to stay with him. So it's like you got the guy that's using the N-word and leaning on someone's neck, but maybe he would never actually pull a gun and shoot. And then the officer is maybe a little bit more polite and hanging back. He's the one that shoots him. Which one of those are the bad apples? Were they both the bad apples? Yeah. Was the supervisor that got on a stand and said, well, you know, he wouldn't have died if he just listened to us. Is she a bad apple?
Yeah.
Are the officers that go on strike and resign their units when their fellow officers are held responsible, are they bad apples? Because we've seen in recent weeks that sometimes 100% of those squads and departments are bad apples, apparently.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's look, I'm not going to say the policing is not a tough job, but it's made tougher by the methods used by the police, and the things in particular that we police in this country. And
Yes.
situations like this, as police work becomes tougher, as more police are on the streets, are going to become more commonplace. And
Hmm.
the solution is not to double down on what's causing the problem. The solution is to take a step back, look at it, and say, what can we do differently?
Hmm.
Not can we do more of the same to fix the problem that this is causing. And I think, we're at, I hope we're at a turning point at this point with
Hmm.
George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all the many hundreds and thousands of Black Americans who have been killed at this point, that we are going to wake the fuck up and say that none of our solutions currently are working, and we need to do something radically different.
Yeah, you mentioned Breonna Taylor, and that's another, like, everyone says the no angel defense. Like, apparently Breonna Taylor was an angel.
Mm-hmm.
She was an EMT, served her community with distinction. She was murdered in the middle of the night in her own bed, shot 9 times by 2 officers, serving a warrant for a person who had already been taken into custody,
At the wrong
miles away
address.
from the address that they were at. And we're 105 days past that incident. None of the officers have been charged. Only one has been discharged from his job and fired for negligence. If you can't get justice for Breonna Taylor, how the hell are you going to get justice for anybody? And I think that's also what gives the lie to their no angel defense, because when you do have a perfect victim, nobody covers that. It's not like Breonna Taylor gets like front page and continuing coverage and stuff and all this. And if it's not for like the daily Twitter things about demanding justice for her, you'd be easy to forget. But like, you think of that, and it's like so many in the last few months where it's like no one, and you think about like one of the reasons this thing blew up really big, this incident in 2009, it was, the era of starting to be cell phones and smartphones, and there was dozens of people filming this ongoing act of brutality, and you could tell the police didn't like it.
Yeah.
Like, and I think you made a point. It's like the things that we have, like, I don't want to be too hard on police, because you're right. It's a tough job. It's certainly a shit ton tougher than my job,
Mm-hmm.
any of the jobs I've ever had. But I think it's hard for us to charge these people with fighting wars on drugs and poverty and whatnot, and not to see themselves as soldiers and not to see us as potential enemy combatants.
Yeah.
If we want our trusted neighborhood cops back, like I'm trying to think of like every time we treated like a public intoxication as if it was a felony,
Mm-hmm.
like how many fucking people would be in jail, how many families would be disrupted, how many communities would fucking hate the cops that love them now. And I think about like, like in my hometown when, young people would fight in the streets and stuff, like no one went to fucking jail. The cops went in there and cooled things down, called their parents and all that stuff. But like, it's this drug war, going back
That's
to
a
The
huge part of
Wire,
it.
Michael B. Jordan. Like if you criminalize these vices, it's a double-edged sword, because it sucks to be addicted to drugs. If you're addicted to drugs, some of the drugs I think are fine to be
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote addicted to. I'm addicted to caffeine.
Sure. Me too.
I've had periods of my life I really enjoyed alcohol. Going through a period of my life where I really enjoy THC. I would hate to suspect that I would hate to do fucking serious time. And that's one of the other things in the criminal justice system. The idea that I can go into Ohio with a medical exemption card and shop at these very posh, very nice medical dispensaries at the same time that people in my state are serving hard time for nonviolent drug offenses. I mean, shit, we should be rioting about that stuff too. But like we
Yeah.
got to, sociologists, everyone talks about like, oh, this is all just guilt and blame and all this other stuff. I don't think sociologists talk in terms of like guilt and blame. They talk about in terms of like, here's a societal problem. What are the root causes? What are we doing to attack those root causes? Oh, those things make those root causes better or worse, and they reinforce themselves. We can stop doing that and do this other stuff. And they're against people that just want law and order, and they want criminals punished, and they think that the brutality of the punishment and the conviction equals what am I saying? A least amount of recidivism. Or,
Sure.
yeah, you punish a criminal and they'll get scared straight, right? You
Right.
know, they'll come out of there and they'll be choir boys. But we found out, I mean, we've known for years that the opposite is true.
Mm.
Um, you know, this movie is just very sad. The last 15, 20 minutes, it's hard not to just sob through because, like, shit, this is something that happened over 10 years ago. It's something that's still happening. It's happening at the time. It's happening in this period of intense scrutiny over, you know, police brutality. We're still getting these stories coming out in the last few weeks. And like, what the fuck? When is it ever going to end?
Yeah. And the last chunk of this movie, like everything from, the train party on, is, like you said, it's heartbreaking. It's hard not to be affected by it. And especially the thing that really affected me was Octavia Spencer's performance as his mother, Wanda, I think her name is, because she's trying to keep her boy safe by suggesting he take the BART instead of potentially, driving drunk, getting, either arrested or killed that way. And I just like, when I thought about, okay, what does it mean to keep your young black son safe in America? Where is the safety? If you can't be safe riding the BART home, if you can't be safe literally lying in your own fucking bed in your own house, where's the safety? What is she talking about safety? It doesn't make any sense.
But it's the way, like, it's how else do you do it? I mean, I've heard it time and time again. You know, I talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, but it seems like that's something that, like, it's something that, like, white folks, I think, have a hard time understanding the extra education you get as a black person. Like, hey, here's how you handle cop situations. And if something like this happens, you got to do this. And you don't ever do this. And like, if you get any of these rules wrong, you might be dead. Meanwhile, cops can break rule after rule, force restriction after force restriction, and say, hey, I feared for my life, qualified immunity. What else do? You try to, it's just a systemic victim blaming, right? And it's, I tried to hold it together, but there's this moment where Octavia Spencer, his mom, her son's just died, and she wants to go hold him while his body's still warm, and she can't because his body's evidence in a murder investigation. So, like, what the fuck? That's such a, I don't know how you ever get over that. I don't know how you ever get over not being able to be there for your baby when he's dying and not be able to hold him when he's dead.
Yeah. I don't think you do. The things you can do are the things that she's done. She sued the police in the city for murdering her son, and she's taken that money and she's formed a foundation to try to get some justice for other people who would experience the same thing.
This is what you do. And I hate to say it, but probably all these individual efforts over the last decade or two have, and the increase of cameras and being awareness, that's like, it's starting to, like you said, I don't know if this is the inflection point or if we still got another couple of years to go, but like, that's, I always get like, I've got kind of freshly upset because there's a couple weeks ago, when the George Floyd fund had gone over like $10 million or whatever, and people are like, oh yeah, this family really needs all that money. I'm like, man, you do research. Everyone's acting like the family is like, oh my God, we won the fucking lottery. It's all good. But like, most of the times they start these foundations and they go into college scholarships and they go into like political reform and stuff. Like, yeah, fuck yeah, give the family of George Floyd $10 million. And there's this other scene I think that's kind of pivotal to the scene. I don't know, like I didn't have enough time to research everything that was apocryphal or where everything was sourced from. But apparently, Oscar has this meeting with this white guy who's married and he's got this very well-to-do wife, and he intervenes and allows his pregnant wife to go use the bathroom, and they talk, and he said, like, how did you know? I was like, Oscar's talking about the reasons he hasn't proposed yet because he doesn't have enough money, can't afford the ring, and this white guy says, oh, I had the same thing, I couldn't get it together, had some run into the law, I stole the ring we got married in. And then I got my act together and I got this web design thing, and he gives, like, you think like, oh man, this is Oscar's chance to escape this cycle and to make something of himself, to have his qualities, and then he gets shot later. But like, there is that difference between like what you can get away with, depending on what color your skin is, where you grew up, how much money your family had. Like, you're offered so many more opportunities to come back from the brink than you are if you grew up with a different skin tone in a different area of the country where your neighborhood is policed differently.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I just I don't know, anything about Oscar Grant's life, and I don't want to take this movie as gospel. What I do know is that it was wrong to kill him.
Yeah.
And I do know exactly what happened during that moment because I've seen it. I went and I watched the video, not from the film, but I watched the video from people's cell phones who were on site. I saw the BART cameras themselves. There's no disputing that fact. There was nothing in those videos that should have resulted in a man's death.
Yeah, and it goes back. So I've heard a couple things in the last few weeks. People are like, well, like for example, the guy who got shot in the back running away from a Wendy's that he had drunkenly fallen asleep in the drive-through. If I'm that cop, I just heard this someone was talking about this on the news. Like, it's like, how did those cops know that he didn't have a gun and he wasn't going to run into someone's house and take a hostage and cause a standoff and all that kind of stuff? I heard the same thing. Like, there's this ridiculous case about 2 months ago where some diamond thieves, it was like something out of a fucking movie, ripped off this local store and hijacked a UPS driver, led a high-speed drive with this guy as a hostage in a busy freeway in Florida. The cops cut him off and they get in a semicircle and advance on this thing and just ventilate this UPS truck, kill both of the perpetrators, kill the hostage, kill a man in a pulled over in a drive, wounded several others. And the suggestion was, well, what do? We just let these guys get away? And I'm like,
that's not.
Maybe it's time to maybe do that. Like, you know what? If there's a half dozen cases where cops don't kill somebody and they run off and kill 12 people, maybe society will be like, oh, okay, well, shit, man. But like, against a backdrop of people getting shot in the back fleeing, which again, if you're a fan of pop culture, that's the number one. Like, if you see a law person do that or a soldier shoot a person running away unarmed, they're a bad guy. They're always a bad guy. Absolutely. Right? They're never like, oh, well, that's understandable. Who knows? That's always coded as cowardly, yellow shitting shit. And you just have dozens and dozens of those. Like, maybe we should try not killing them and seeing what happens, because I doubt it's going to be this post-apocalyptic scenario that I feel like we're living in right now. Like, maybe we should police these minority communities the way my neighborhood was policed, the way that many suburbs are policed, because especially when a lot of the crime is drug crime, God damn it, I'm getting so sick and tired of like doing the same thing literally over and over again for years and years, generations, and being surprised constantly that we have an ever worsening solution result. I should say.
And like I said, I hope things are changing now, and it's great. It's nice to have all these anti-American racist symbols being pulled down in the form of statues and names on different organizations and buildings being changed, things like that. But we got to do more than symbolic gestures. You got to make substantive changes. You cannot just simply paper over this problem by saying, well, we took a name off a school. It's no longer, now it's going to be the Floyd School. That's not enough. That's symbolic. That is not a true change. We need to do major things, like you said, ending the war on drugs. The war on drugs disproportionately affects Black Americans in this country. It should be treated as a health problem, much like we don't arrest cancer patients. We get them the help they need.
And there's risky behaviors you can take to increase your cancer choices, bad decisions, obesity, smoking, eating burnt meat, lots of things can increase your cause of cancer, yet we do not criminalize.
I mean, we've tried that, right? Like we tried it with alcohol. Look how that ended. And it's
blood in the streets.
It's the prime example, and it should stick out in your fucking face every time you think about why marijuana is being treated as a Schedule 1 drug, right?
Yeah,
Like,
you can't even research it. It has zero medicinal value. There's no reason for you to take it in your body as far as the federal government has is concerned.
right. I'm pretty sure that basically every scientist would agree that alcohol has no medicinal qualities either. And yet we have, as a society, come together and said that is fine. That is a personal choice. If you would like to put this into your body and experience the intoxicating effects, you can do so. Just don't commit crimes while you're doing it. And that's fine.
Right.
That's the way it should be. And yet we treat this other substance, which is less harmful, potentially, is maybe even more valuable, potentially, as some horrible crime, something that needs to be stamped out. And then we go and we police the communities where we think it's most prevalent. And those inevitably are the people who get stuck in these cycles. And if you can't see the hypocrisy every time you take a drink of Jack Daniels, you're not thinking. You're not a thinking human being. You need to just take a look at what you're doing and how it's affecting other people, and just say, does this make any sense?
Yeah, and it's not just the war on drugs, because like that's something I think also that's like it's refreshing to see people thinking about this in terms, like for the longest time it was just cops shouldn't shoot unarmed people. Well, they're no angel. Now people are looking at like, if for 30 years we've cut the budget of education, we've cut our social worker, we've cut our community programs, we've cut help to unemployed and social security benefits, we've cut the aid to homeless, we've cut just funding to mental health. And we look around and on these big cities, a lot of the up to 50% of the budget goes to policing. It's obvious that we're taking these holes that we've created fiscally in our society and we're papering it over with the police, and we're asking them to do this impossible mission. Yeah. And I just saw in Cincinnati, 37% of our city budget goes to police. A lot of people are wondering, like, Jesus, what if you took half of that and you put it back into helping homeless people, helping people that are addicted to drugs, helping people that are having trouble putting food on their table for their kids, finding housing. Like, maybe we wouldn't have all this shit going on if we didn't do that. Like, it's and I think that's where, it's unfortunate, I think, the phrase like defund the police has caught on, because people hear that and it's like, Jesus Christ, a lawless, cityscape. But it's more of like restructuring and refunding, putting money to where it's actually going to prevent societal rot that inevitably leads to crime and has always led to crime in any generation you look at. And redeploying that to actually attack, like sociologists ask, what are the root causes? What are things that are actually going to make things better? Let's try them, and keep trying until we find something that works. Let's not keep doing the same thing we've always done and expect it to do something, because every 10 years you're going to get, you could make a movie every year about fruit along the lines of Fruitvale Station. You can make a couple dozen. And, I feel like now people are like, because that's the thing, is like the attention's on the people that get shot and killed. But if you talk about the people that just get their lives fucked over irrevocably by the legal system, it's 10 or 100 times that.
Yeah. And that's why the ending of this movie is so powerful, because this doesn't stop at, his wife to be, or his mother or his daughter, right? The devastating effects will reach out through the community with everyone they ever know. Because what kind of opinion is someone who is friends with T or friends with Wanda gonna have of the person who murdered their father and or son? It's like the ramifications here are enormous, and we don't necessarily factor those in.
Yeah, and I really encourage everybody, if you haven't given it a shot, season 3 of Serial. I think everybody wrote off Serial after season 2. But it does an in-depth look in the criminal justice system by going an extreme deep dive into a year's worth of cases in whatever county Cleveland is in, here in our home state of Ohio. And there's one that stuck with me, where there's this kid, he's very bright, he's doing very well, except came from a good home, a black kid, And he did everything right. And these cops still treated him like with brutality. I can't remember because there's so many fucking crazy stories, but I think he's the one that was locked in a broom closet over a 3-day weekend. He had to shit in buckets. He didn't get any food. And, he went through this, he got charged and the charges were dismissed 9 months later, but he's gotten so fucked over by the criminal justice system. And there's the public defender was like, this, you watch. This is going to fuck with him the rest of his life. The fact that he's been through this young kid, he was, 18, 19 years old. This is his first experience. And that was part of the story. It's like the next time he had to run with the law, he's defensive, he's defiant. Mm-hmm. Who wouldn't be?
Yeah.
And now he's back and he's a repeat offender. And a lot of these cops that because he sued the city and won some money, and the cops relentlessly harassed him and his family, pulled him over frivolously. I just look at things and that's why it's I used to be one of those big was well, Jesus Christ, how hard is it to keep your hands on 10 and 2, say yes sir, no sir, turn on your lights, listen to the police instruction. But I've seen videos of a guy sobbing on his hands and knees while 2 officers bark contradicting order, begging, please don't shoot me, I have a family. Guy gets shot. Mm-hmm. I've seen a guy say, hey, I've got a legally owned weapon. It's a state that I've got a permit for it. It's right here in my back. Oh, pow, pow, pow. It doesn't matter whether you do things right or wrong with some of these guys. And when that happens in the community, the entire, it's, and then the cops in these communities want to be oh, we're serving and you're protecting. We're your legal guardians. And it's the more direct hands-on experience you have with that element of the criminal justice system, the more you kind of heart turns dark about it. And once enough of society hits that, it's already in there with poor black communities, even affluent black communities. It's getting there with a lot of poor white communities that are seeing a lot of this stuff with opiates and meth, destroying their communities, just like it destroyed the quote-unquote ghettos in the 80s and 90s. Once enough society just stops buying into law and order, then you got fucking Mad Max shit.
Yeah.
And I like Law and Order.
Sure. Yeah.
I like it when it's impartial and fair and is there to restore people, restorative justice rather than punitive. And goddamn, we got to find out, or enough people stop buying into it. It's bad scene. So
yeah, it's just a philosophical change that needs to happen here with our quote unquote law enforcement. Another thing that I really like in this movie is the way that they sort of contrast 2 situations, and the thing that it says about the difference when you're interacting with police versus interacting with normal people. Because there's a scene, and you brushed up against it when you were talking about the wedding ring stuff, where he goes up to a shop owner whose shop is clearly closed. The guy's wanting to go home or whatever. And he says, hey, my girlfriend and her friend need to use the bathroom. Can they go in? And he tries, essentially to bribe him with a $10 or whatever, his last $10. Mm-hmm. And the guy eventually, he talks his way into that situation. And he's like, okay, yeah, you're a human being. I'm a human being. I understand your needs. Let's go, Mm-hmm. And they get in and they go to the bathroom. So he has successfully talked his way through that situation. And then he tries that with the cops. Right. There's one line in there where he says oh, I'm gonna take care of this. And he stands up to talk, to have a rational, reasonable conversation.
Hey, look, man,
with
we're just trying to get home.
Screaming the N-word in his face.
We don't want to be arrested. We're just trying to get home.
Right.
It's 2:00 in the morning. Yeah.
And he thinks he can, in a normal situation, you could talk to the other person on the other side of that and come to some reasonable agreement here. That's not what was happening here. And he failed to see that. And so, it cost him his life. It shouldn't have. But I like how the movie sets up that juxtaposition between those 2 scenarios.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that, I just think of his mother's last visit to him in prison, I thought was an interesting contrast to kind of the joyful family, the kind of family reunion style New Year's Eve celebration they had 1 year later. There's a lot of that compare and contrast stuff. And I just yeah, I don't know. That's the problem with the he's no angel defense. No one's an angel, and everyone's got their best. This guy, he I thought it was an interesting grace note that he dumps this. He dumps like 2 pounds of weed into the Pacific Ocean.
It's a lot of money.
And as the guy was going up there to like meet him to do this deal, and this guy's kind of bums like, I drove all this way, and he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, and he gives him like his last eighth and some money. He's like, hey, I appreciate your drive, like and doing that thing is like, there's also like some of his buddies thought like when he talked the women into being able to like not have to piss in the streets that they were going to go like, oh, we just agreed to like, it's just the women going to be that. And then like some of his buddies, and he's like, no, that's not what we agreed to with this guy.
Yeah.
Like everyone has their moments of decency. Everyone has their moments that they regret. It's just like, man, I'm so glad I didn't get shot to death on the 5 or 6 moments in my life where I probably could have been, I was in the wrong frame of mind. I was in the wrong place, the wrong time. And if the cops had been there, and some people got a little jumpy and shooty, I'm really glad that never happened to me.
Sure.
So it's I don't know. Like I said, it's one of those things where like I talked about this in the 3 Right Turns episode a couple weeks back, where Run the Jewels dropped their newest album, and it's got a line where Killer Mike's talking about you watching a person like him being choked to death by an officer on TV until you say you can't breathe, and people are like, oh man, you must have written that verse last week, because this thing literally dropped a week or 2 after George Floyd got killed. And he's like, no, this literally happens all the fucking time. I was writing this about Eric Garner that happened 6 years ago. And, when I just sucked my teeth when I saw this guy leaning on this guy's neck. And,
this
like,
movie from 2013, an incident from 2009.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like you can maybe justify this of like this was like fucking one cop, and he's got no backup, and he's trying to maintain control, and he's got a crowd of bloodthirsty people. Like if it's some kind of fucking Mogadishu situation where you got one down helicopter and you're trying to kneel on a guy's neck to get like, but there's 9 officers at the scene. And a bunch of like kind of happy New Year's Eve traffic people. There wasn't like, it's just crazy. It's crazy. And like you, I just don't know. I hope this is an inflection point, and I've gotten a lot of hope because I've been talking to a lot of my friends and family who have been, the Law and Order, they should just listen, shouldn't resist. They're no angel. Like there's a difference in the way they're talking about that. And that kind of gives me hope. Because that stuff sounds really good if you come from certain parts of the country and you don't have experience with the kind of policing that you get in some of the other areas. That stuff makes sense. But then you actually see with your own eyes and change your mind.
I think it's easy to apply that to something where it happens in an instant. It's like okay, well, somebody made a bad decision somewhere along the way and somebody ended up shot. It's a lot harder to justify that opinion when it's 9 minutes of somebody's neck being kneeled on on camera until they pass out, and you have bystanders, emergency medical technicians, like, oh, you've got all these people around going, you're killing that guy, and nothing is done about it. It's a lot fucking harder to have that viewpoint. Yeah, when it's a sustained or someone's murder,
literally shot fleeing in the back unarmed. It's or you have an EMT, come home from a hard shift of saving people's lives, get shot in her bed 9 times. Yeah, and the cops file 0 injuries.
What order should she have listened to?
Yeah. It's just it's a fucking sickness that we got in our society, and there are cures, but they're going to be tough, and we're going to have to get a lot of people on board with them. So, if you're kind of on the fence on this, I know that this stuff tends to rankle people's feelings and opinions when we talk about it. Man, I just really encourage you to really to dig in, do your research, and if you think people should die because they don't follow police instructions, then say so. Because I don't think the majority of people think that's true. I don't think that, people that have no experience with law and law enforcement, should be the ones, the onus is on them to get through an interaction with police who are heavily armed, heavily armored, have tons of backup and support, have all this society's esteem and power and trust that we put in them. I don't think the onus should be on the civilian to come out of a nonviolent police interaction and not be killed,
Yeah.
I have a very difficult task now. We've been for several weeks talking about pretty difficult, intense things. But next week is the 25th anniversary of the movie Apollo 13, and we've had it on our calendar that we wanted. We both love that movie. We both love space travel. It's a feel-good movie of when the world came together to treasure the lives of three men and spent tons of money and intellectual capital and actual capital to bring them home safely, because human life is precious, and these people were brave explorers. And then that following weekend's July 4th, when we're ostensibly supposed to feel really good about our country and how we declared independence. It's kind of absurd against this backdrop.
It is.
But we can't stop celebrating our better selves as we demand change to curb our worst influences and our instincts. So hopefully people see this as a breath of fresh air. I love this movie. I think it's great, and I'm really looking forward to. I haven't seen it in a good long while. I'm looking forward to see it on its 25th anniversary, and I hope you guys will enjoy that celebration with us. That's what we'll be doing next week. And until then, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jim.
See ya.